think I'm back. So I had a little bit of crash there, so I'm having to use a file that I did separately. There's a couple of slight changes on this one to what you've done already so far. So if we come into select the asset, and then if we come into object mode, you can see I've added these little edges in running around the outside, and I've also tapered the object in ever so slightly on these sides here as well, and I've done that on the low poly as well. So if I hide the high and bring in the low, you can see I've got this slight angle here at the bottom. It's kind of it mimics what the controller does in real life if you have a controller in front of you. So they're just slight bevel inwards, so you can do that quite easily. Press 1 on the keyboard and select the bottom verts. Make sure you're in see-through mode so you can select the ones at the back at the same time, and then scale, and you can just scale them in. Okay, so they would normally be like that, you just scale them in a little bit. And before you do that, you want to add this extra edge in here. So that extra edge is just Control R, and I've just thrown in an edge and placed it here. Okay. All right. So that should put us back to where we are. Oh, and on the high poly, sorry, I should say. Let me just come out of see-through. Hide the low poly. Let's bring back this high poly. So the high poly, I have added in. I've added in these edges here. So if we come out of our smoothing, there you go. To do this, you're probably going to want to add it to yours as well. It's simply a case of adding a load of edges and beveling some of them in. I'll do it now actually because I don't want to miss anything on this tutorial. So I'm just going to undo some of this work. So I'm just going to select all of this. Ignore this part of the tutorial. Oops. Okay, so yours looks like this. With this probably actually higher up than mine. I'm going to remove that. So around here. Okay. So yours probably looks a little bit more like this in its high poly, and then we want to add in this extra kind of piece, this extra detailing in the middle. So to do it, we go Control R, and then we add in. I'm going to do them one at a time. So it's not in the middle of the controller; it's slightly further down. So it's around here, and then Control R again. Bring another one in, very close, very tight, like that. And then I went round and selected this internal piece. So 3 on the keyboard, and then I'm holding down Shift and just selecting all of these internal edges. Holding down Shift at all times, except for when I'm rotating, obviously. So like right now I let go of Shift, use the middle mouse button to rotate, and then I hold Shift again in order to select more. So that's what I want, that piece there. And then I'm going to right click and I want to extrude these faces, but I want to extrude them along normals. So it means that they either come out or they go in. Okay. Now we want to make sure that we've got sharp edges on these. So we're going to extrude them in ever so slightly. So just a tiny amount, and then right click and extrude them in again. So extrude faces along normals, like that. Okay. Then if we look at that, so if we bring our subdivision surface back on, you can see that it's now got that nice sort of line running around where it would have connected the two parts of the object together. Right. So we're back where we were. So I'm going to bring my layout back. I'm going to come into see-through mode so I can see it again. I'm going to press 7 on our numpad. I'm going to create these buttons in now. So I'm going to do only one of them because then you can just duplicate it for another because they're identical. So we need to do one of these and one of these and one of these. So let's go. Our origin point's in a nice place right now, so I'm going to leave it there. If you need to move it, Shift and right click. And then Shift A. Let's bring in a mesh. We want to bring in a cylinder, and that cylinder's huge, so we want to scale it down. We want it to be the same height as this button, and then we can zoom in, Shift and drag, shift and middle mouse button to move around. And then we're going to go tab on the keyboard in order to see its object mode. And then I'm going to go see-through as well, so Alt and Z. Oh, already was in see-through. Now I can select the verts that I want to move. So I've selected those ones there. I'm going to go G on the keyboard and then X, and I move those across to here. And then again, I'm going to select these verts here, and I'm going to go G on the keyboard and X and move those over to here. Cool. Now I'm going to look at it from an angle. I'm going to come out of see-through mode. That's roughly about the amount it sticks out at, actually, but it's probably sticking through the asset a bit too far, but for now we're just going to leave it like that. I'm going to add another retaining edge running around here because we're going to smooth this guy up, and if I just smoothed it right now it would look like that, which is horrible. So let's take that off. Let's go Control and R, click, drag, and drop that in there, and then this middle piece here I'm going to select it using 3 on the keyboard to select faces. Then I'm going to press I on the keyboard to invert the selection. So we're going to invert it like that, and then press I again to invert that again. And then I'm going to press 1 on the keyboard so I've selected the vertices, and then I can right click and merge those and collapse them so they'll come together. Not bothered about the detailing and how that looks at the moment, it's fine. Now if we look at it with our smoothing modifier turned on, it looks like this. We need to right click the asset and make sure that it's shading smooth, and we also need to make sure that we've got our auto smooth turned on and we're set to 60 over here. And then finally we just need to add another ring on the bottom because you can see it's tapering in like that. We don't want that. So let's come back out into object mode, and then we can go into our see-through mode so we can see what we're doing. Control R, click, drag, accept, come back out of tab, come back out of see-through, and there we can see we haven't got that tapering anymore. That's kind of the sort of angle that we want. Cool. So that's one, and then we can look at it from numpad 7 from above, come into see-through mode, make sure we've got the cylinder selected. So this is our start select, isn't it? Start select. And then what we would do is with start selected, we'd make a duplicate of it and move it over to here. But we're going to unwrap the asset first. So I'm going to make a duplicate of it just so we can see the asset in its kind of finished state, untextured. But if you don't need to do this if you don't want to, because we're going to delete one of them afterwards anyway. So I'm going to go Shift and D to make a duplicate, and then I'm going to press X straight away and make sure our duplicate's moved into the correct place, and come out of see-through mode. So now we're looking like this. And then now I'm just going to build the squares for this bit over here. So again, see-through mode, Shift right click to move our origin point. This is where we want our first square or cube to be. Shift A, mesh, cube, scale down so it fits in that area there. Again, you can kind of eyeball it, you don't have to be bang on. And look at it from an angle, come out of see-through mode. We want to scale it on Z because they're quite thin, they just stick out a little bit. And then, sorry, the little delete key in your numpad, or the dot on the numpad, will allow you to focus in on an object, just in case you wanted to know that. And then here, so we're going to go see-through mode again, we're going to come into our edge mode, and then we want to select all of our horizontal, make sure we've got the right asset selected, there we go. Edge mode selected, number 2 on the keyboard, and then we want to click a marquee across, so we're selecting all of those edges. And then same thing as we've done on the outside of the main controller basically, so Control B, pull away so that it bevels, use your scroll wheel to add more or less beveling in there. Remember that our smoothing modifier is going to do a lot of the work for us, so we don't need to add too many extra edges in here. And then we need to connect these back up again, same thing that we did with the main body of the controller. So I'll go quiet for a moment whilst I do this. actually need to do, because we can probably delete the bottom, can't we? So if you select the middle piece at the bottom, and then press, I think it's Control and the plus, the plus symbol on your keyboard, it will grow your selection. And we can just hit delete and faces, that gets rid of those. And then we're going to want an extra retaining edge running around here, because we know that if we added smoothing on now, we're going to get a look that we don't want, which is that. It's a bit too like, looks like it's melting. So we want to bring in an extra edge in there. So we go Control R, drop it in, bring it up nice and close. That's a better look. And then again, make sure your shade smooth's turned on, make sure that your auto smooth's turned on, and your edges set to 60 or more. If we want this to be really smooth, we can bring this up even higher, like that. So it's up to you how, and that's like completely super smooth. I think it should be that. Okay, so mine's set to 72.6. Alright, so that's that piece, and then we want to obviously create the cylinder that comes out of it with a button. So I'm going to go to my Control A, it will create the cylinder in here, so we're going to look at it from the top down, so Control A, Mesh, Cylinder, and then Scale, it's about there I imagine. Let's come into see-through mode, make sure we've got layout turned on so we can see what's going on. Ooh, that was almost perfect. Actually is perfect. Let's leave that there then. Scale Z, we want to scale it down. You can kind of see what I'm doing. I'm going to come out of see-through mode now so you can see clearer. G, Z, bring the button up. So the button is probably still 2, so scale Z. It's probably something more like that. Okay. Again, exactly the same process. So we're just going to add these retaining edges. We want this to be a bit smoother. So I'll go quiet for a moment. You know the buttons that I'm pressing because they appear over here. Oh, they don't actually. My screencast needs to be on. There we go. Now they appear there. Control R. 3. Then I. I again. 1. Right click. Merge. Collapse. Control R, bring that down. I can't see where the bottom is, so I'm going to have to come into see-through. I'm going to press 2 on the keyboard, GG, I can move that further down. Then I can add on my modifier. Let's move this up so we've got more space. Subdivision surface, let's see what that looks like. Again, make sure you've got shade smooth turned on, boom. Very nice, cool. All that's left to do really is to name these things correctly. So this doesn't actually stick out that far, so I'm going to drop that slightly, which means my button then needs to drop down. Okay, and then we want to duplicate these, so we can have that one selected, select the other one, Shift D, and then to X, move it across. And if we look at it again from looking straight down, so 7 on the keyboard, and then go into our see-through mode with 7 on the keyboard selected, and then we can reposition this one. So that's cylinder, yeah, cube 1 and cylinder 1, so still selected. I can move them back so they're in the right place. Alright, and that should be the high poly version of the controller complete. We just need to create the low poly versions of these things, so that's quite easy to do. So let's clean up some of what we've got over here on this right hand side now, because we've made quite a few things. Cylinder number 1 is this one, which is our A button. A button. Cylinder 001 is our B button. Then we've got cube, which is our A button block that sits underneath. And cube 1 is our B button block. start and select, and start and select. Oh, start and select. One should be start and one should be select, really. That one start. Cool. They might be the wrong way around, but who cares? All of these guys need to be inside the high poly, so we move them up and into our high poly collection. So if we hide the high poly collection, we hide everything, and if we open up our low poly, that's all we've got. Then we want to create duplicates of all of these buttons into our low poly. So we'll start with start and select. So select the start one, and then we'll go Shift and D. Make sure we've got it selected. Shift D. Right click, and you can see we've made a copy of that. Drop that into our low poly. So that one's in here, and then in that we want to remove any of this smoothing that we've added to it. We can go in and make some more changes to these in a second. I'm only going to do one because we're going to delete the other one anyway. Like I said, I just wanted you to be able to see what it looks like. And then we want, so our A button and our A button block, those two, we want to make sure that they're duplicated. So duplicate them, then right click so they don't move, and then select them and move them into low poly. So now we've got one of these and one of these already created. So I'm going to hide my high poly, and then with my low poly I can go back in and remove the subdivision on this and remove the subdivision on that. There's nothing else got subdivision on it, no. And then we can go back through and just kind of fine tune, so perhaps there's more verts that we can get rid of. So with this, I'm going pretty extreme here, by the way. I'm removing stuff that you probably don't really need to, but where you've got a vert that goes from here down to there and it's a straight line, that means this line's not doing anything, so it's pointless us having it. So I'm selecting it, delete I on the keyboard in order to delete it the whole way around, and then again, so Shift Alt click, delete key, and then I to remove the edges, and the same here. So this one here is not doing anything. Alt click, delete I. Same on the block. So let's come out of that, out of see-through. Let's go check the block. Come back into edit mode. Let's go into see-through mode on that and see what we can remove. Okay, so the edge that's selected, that one there, that can go. So delete an I. Nothing else really can come off that. So I'm leaving the rest of it as it is. And then finally, let's look at what we've got on the stop icon. Can't select it. There we go. So let's have a look at that. So again, that line can go. So delete an I, and then this one here, Shift Alt click, delete I, and then looking from the top, we can probably remove this one as well. Alright, done. There's our low poly. Cool. So we now have a low poly version of our controller with the buttons that we need, because we're going to make duplicates. The next stage will be to unwrap the low poly so that we can apply the high poly over the top. So what you should have now is this and this.